3. My Amish wife gave birth alone. While I was at church, the wagon wheel hits a rut on the road home and I hear it before I see it. A scream, not loud, low, the kind that comes from a woman who has already been screaming for hours and has nothing left but the bottom of her throat. I drop the reins. I don't tie the horse. I run. The kitchen door is open. The kerosene lamp on the table is hissing. Rebecca always turns it down before she sits, and it's burning full and crooked. There's a wet rag on the floor by the stove. One of her shoes is off. Just the one, the left. Rebecca, the bedroom is hot, August hot. The kind of August where the air sits on your chest like a wool blanket somebody forgot to take off the line. She is on her knees beside the bed, both hands gripping the quilt her mother made for our wedding. The blue squares, the white ones with the small cross stitch. And there is blood. More than I have ever seen come out of a person who was still talking. She looks up at me. Her hair is stuck to her forehead. Her lips are white. "Joseph," she says. "Just my name. Joseph. The baby's coming wrong. I was 26 years old. I had been gone 4 hours. I had been at church." Quick pause. "My name is Joseph, and this is..." If these stories stay with you, if they remind you of something the old ones knew, subscribe. It's free, and it's the reason I can keep telling them. Tell me in the comments, what did your mother or your grandmother keep in the brown bottle on the high shelf, the one nobody was supposed to touch? And if you want to go further, a super chat or a membership, that's you telling me these old ways are worth remembering. That keeps this going. Now, back to what happened. In our community, a woman doesn't birth alone. That's the rule. The midwife comes. Ours was Sister Anna May, 60-some years old, hands like cedar bark, and the husband fetches her the minute the pains start coming 5 minutes apart. The mother of the laboring woman comes too, an aunt, a sister, somebody who has done it before. The kitchen fills up with women and warm water and the smell of red raspberry leaf tea steeping on the back of the stove. The men go to the barn. That's how it's done. That's how it's been done since before my great-grandfather crossed the water. Nobody taught me that. I just saw it. Every birth in our district, from the time I was old enough to follow Dad out to the milking, ended the same way. A man waiting in the barn, a woman doing the holy work inside. But Rebecca's pains weren't 5 minutes apart when I left for church that morning. They weren't even pains yet. Just a tightness, she said. Just the baby turning, maybe. She was 3 weeks out from her time. She told me to go. She told me twice, "Joseph, it's Communion Sunday. Go." And in our way, you don't argue with a wife about Communion Sunday. You go. The bishop expects you. The community counts the men. I kissed the top of her head, the part where she always smelled like the lavender she dried above the sink, and I went. I almost turned the buggy around at the end of the lane. I didn't. I should say that plain. Rebecca was 24. We had been married 2 years and 4 months. She was small, smaller than her sisters, with hands that could quiet a colicky baby just by holding it, and a way of humming while she worked that I still hear sometimes when the house gets too quiet. Her mother had died the winter before our wedding, pneumonia, the kind that comes fast. So she didn't have a ma'am to call for. She had me, and she had Sister Anna May, who lived 2 miles down the ridge road, past the Stoltzfus farm, past the covered bridge with the loose board on the 3rd plank from the left. What I loved about Rebecca, and I'll say this once because I don't say it easy, was that she was steady, steadier than me. When our mare went down with milk fever the first spring of our marriage, I was the one pacing. She was the one in the stall with the garlic and the ginger water, talking to that horse like it was a child. The horse lived. I remember, no wait, it wasn't garlic that time. It was the cayenne and the molasses. Dad always told me to get the remedy right when I told a story, because the remedy is the story. The horse lived. That's what mattered. And I thought, wrong, as it turned out, that a woman who could pull a mare back from the edge could pull herself back from anything. The morning I left for church, she was kneading bread, 2 loaves, one for us and one for the widow Mass down the road. She had set out the small basket she used for elderberries, even though it wasn't elderberry season. I asked her why. She said she didn't know. She just felt like having it down. That basket was still on the counter when I came home. Empty. I keep thinking about that basket. The bedroom smelled like iron. That's the first thing. Not herbs. Not lamp oil. Iron. Like the inside of the smithy on a wet day. The lamp was on the dresser, the wick turned too high, and the flame was throwing long shadows across the wall. The wall with the sampler her mother had stitched. The one that said, "Bless this house" in faded red thread. The quilt on the bed was already soaked through in 2 places. She had laid out a clean sheet on the floor by the bed, folded, square corners. Even mid-labor, even alone, she had laid out a clean sheet. And next to it, the brown glass bottle, shepherd's purse tincture, the one her mother had made before she died. The one Rebecca kept on the high shelf for the bleeding that comes after. She had set it out. She knew. I dropped down beside her. My knees hit the floorboard so hard I felt it in my teeth. "How long?" I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "How long has it been like this?" She couldn't answer for a minute. Then she said, "Since the second hymn. The second hymn at communion is 2 hours in. 2 hours. She had been laboring alone for 2 hours, and the baby was coming wrong, and she had still tried to wait for me without sending word because nobody was on the road to send. 'I need you to ride for Anna May,' she said. And then her whole body locked up. I saw it lock. I saw her shoulders pull toward her ears, and she made a sound I had never heard a person make. Not a scream, lower. The sound a cow makes when the calf is turned. I knew that sound from the barn. I knew what it meant in a cow. I didn't want to know what it meant in my wife.
"Joseph," she said, when she could talk again.
The baby's foot. I felt the foot. A breach. In our world, in 1990-something, in a farmhouse 2 miles from the nearest phone shanty, a breach with no midwife was the kind of thing the old women whispered about at funerals. I knew that. She knew that. She reached for the brown bottle herself because my hands weren't working. She put 7 drops under her own tongue. 7. I counted because counting was the only thing my brain could still do. Then she said, "Get behind me, hold my back, don't leave to ride, there isn't time." And God help me, I listened, because she was steadier than me. She was steadier than me right up until she wasn't. What happened in the next 40 minutes I will not tell in full, because some things belong to her, and not to the camera. But I will tell you this. The baby came, feet first, blue, silent. Rebecca turned her face into the quilt and said, rub him with the rough towel. Hard, harder than you think." I did. I rubbed our son with the flour sack towel until my arm burned, and somewhere in the 2nd minute, or maybe the 3rd, I lost time. He pulled in a breath that sounded like a door creaking open. And then he cried. Then, but he cried. Rebecca didn't. She had gone quiet. Too quiet. Her lips were the color of skim milk. The sheet under her was darker than the quilt now, and the brown bottle was on its side. And I understood, the way a man understands a thing in his bones before his mind catches up, that I was about to lose her. I put the baby on her chest. I put her own hand on the baby, and I reached for the bottle and gave her 7 more drops. And I prayed in Deech, the prayers my gross-daddy had taught me when I was 6, because the English ones had left me. What I learned later, what the women told me at the quilting frolic 3 months on, was this. Rebecca had known the baby was breech for 2 days. She had felt the head up under her ribs on Friday. She hadn't told me. She hadn't told Sister Anna May either. In our way, a woman carries her worries quiet until the time comes. She had hoped the baby would turn. She had drunk the evening primrose tea. She had done the slow walks down the lane at dusk. And when Communion Sunday came and the pain started light, she told me later, when she could talk about it, she thought she had more time. She thought I'd be home before it was real. And I want to say I would have stayed if I'd known. I want to say that. But the truth is more complicated than I am comfortable with, even now. Because in our community, a man going to church is not a small thing. The bishop notices. The other men notice. And Rebecca knew that too. She protected me from a choice I shouldn't have had to make by not telling me there was a choice. She carried it alone, so I wouldn't have to carry the look on the bishop's face. That is the kind of woman she was. That is the kind of silence we lived inside. And I didn't understand any of it that night. I only understood it later, the way a man understands the weight of a thing after he has already been carrying it for years. For a long time after, I couldn't sit at the kitchen table without looking at the bedroom door. I'd be eating my oatmeal and I'd catch myself counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, the steps from the table to the bed. as if knowing the number would help next time, as if there would be a next time I could outrun. I started keeping the shepherd's purse tincture in my coat pocket, not on the high shelf. In my coat, both coats, the barn coat and the church coat. Rebecca caught me doing it after about a month and didn't say a word, just put her hand on my chest over the pocket and held it there. That was her way. She let me carry what I needed to carry. I kept a second bottle in the buggy too, under the seat, wrapped in a piece of flannel. I'd like to say I felt foolish about it. I didn't. The land doesn't lie, and neither does a man's body when it has learned a thing the hard way. I'll tell you something else. About 6 months after, at a barn raising over at Eli Byler's place, I was up on the second beam handing nails to my brother Amos when he said, "Lo," so the other men couldn't hear. Sarah birthed alone too, the second one. I almost dropped the nails. Amos didn't look at me. He kept hammering. I was in the south field. She didn't send the boy. That was all he said. 7 words, but I heard the whole story in them. And later, eating cold ham at the noon meal, old Jonas Lapp sat down next to me with his plate and said, "Quiet, my Hannah, 1971, twins." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. He just ate his ham and looked out at the field. There were more of us than I had known. Men who had come home to a kitchen that smelled like iron. Men who had counted drops with shaking hands. Nobody talked about it, but we all knew each other by something in the eyes. 4 winters later, Sister Anna Mae died. Stroke, in her sleep, 81 years old. At the viewing, her oldest daughter pressed a small leather pouch into my hand and said, "Ma'am wanted Rebecca to have this." Inside was a folded square of paper, soft with handling, and on it was Anna Mae's own handwriting, the recipe for the shepherd's purse tincture, and underneath, in smaller letters, "For the bleeding that won't stop, and for the women who labor alone, because the men are at church." She had written that. She had known for years, and she had written it down, and she had meant for Rebecca to have it. I sat in the buggy in the funeral home parking lot and read that paper 4 times before I could see straight enough to drive home. The word came to me in the strangest place. I was 61 years old, sitting in the waiting room at the chiropractor's office in town. My back had finally given out from 40 years of milking, and there was a magazine on the table. National Geographic, I think. Some article about midwives in the mountains of Tennessee. And in the middle of the article was a sentence about something the writer called postpartum hemorrhage. 2 words. I had never heard them put together before. The article said it was the leading cause of death for mothers in places without hospitals, and that the old mountain women treated it with a plant, shepherd's purse, that they kept in brown bottles on high shelves. I put the magazine down. My hands were doing the thing they hadn't done since that August night. They were shaking. I sat there a long time. The receptionist asked if I was all right. I told her yes. I wasn't, because for 35 years I had carried that night without a name for what had almost killed my wife, and now there was a name, and the name had been known by other people in other hollers and other valleys, and they had known the same plant, and they had kept it in the same kind of bottle. The boy who had knelt on those floorboards in August of... Give me a second. The boy who had knelt there hadn't been alone in the world. He had only been alone in that room. There is a difference. I wish somebody had told him the difference sooner. The land doesn't lie. But sometimes the land speaks the same truth in 2 different valleys, and the people in each valley think they are the only ones who heard it. What I grieved, sitting in that waiting room, was not what happened. Rebecca lived. Our son lived. He is 41 now, with 4 of his own. What I grieved was the boy in him. The version of me that had walked out to the back field 3 nights after the birth and stood by the fence post until the sun came up. I didn't pray that night. I couldn't. I just stood there and watched my breath fog in the August dark, which shouldn't have been cold but was, because my body had decided it was cold. That boy didn't have the word. He thought he had failed alone. He thought it had been his fault alone. He thought no other man in the world had ever come home to that kitchen. And he carried it that way for 35 years before a magazine in a chiropractor's office finally told him otherwise. I tried to explain it once to an Englishman, a fellow who bought eggs from us. Kind man, asked good questions. I told him a small piece of the story. He said, why didn't she just go to the hospital? And I didn't have an answer that would fit in his world. I didn't have words for the bishop, for Communion Sunday, for the shanty phone 2 miles down a dirt road, for a woman who had been raised to carry her worries quiet, for a tincture made by a mother who was already dead. I just said, it wasn't that kind of place. He nodded like he understood. He didn't. And I don't blame him. That's the loneliness of standing between two worlds. You can't carry one across into the other without spilling most of it on the way. The Amish life gave me 3 things I still carry. The smell of red raspberry leaf tea steeping on the back of a wood stove on a winter morning, which to this day puts me in a kitchen I will never stand in again. The weight of a brown glass bottle in a coat pocket, which taught me that a man prepares for what he hopes will never come. And the sound of my wife humming while she kneads bread on a Sunday morning. Rebecca still hums, 43 years in, which is the sound that has told me every Sunday of my married life that I came home in time. Not soon enough, but in time. There is a difference between those two, and I have made my peace with living in the gap. Here is the truth in plain clothes. The old ways saved us, and the old ways almost killed us, and both of those are true in the same breath. I won't pretend otherwise. The shepherd's purse worked. Anna Mae's recipe worked. Rebecca's own hands, steadier than mine, worked. And also, a phone closer than 2 miles would have worked too. Both tables can be set in the same kitchen. That's what I'm building now, with my sons and with the grandchildren who come around on Saturdays. I tell them the remedies. I also tell them where the phone shanty is. The old ones knew. They didn't know everything. Neither do I. That's plain. If you grew up somewhere your grandfather's hands knew more than the doctor's, if you watched your mother reach for the brown bottle before she reached for the phone, I see you. You carry something old, and that is enough. You don't have to explain it to the people who weren't there. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to apologize for the kitchen you came from. What you watched was real. What worked, worked. What didn't, didn't. And you are allowed to hold both without choosing. To the one still inside the community, kneeling beside someone you love, I see you. To the one who left and still keeps the tincture in the cabinet, I see you. To the Englishman whose grandmother muttered something over a fever and you can't quite remember the words, I see you. To the one whose grandfather knew a remedy he never wrote down and took it with him, I see you, and I'm sorry. To the one who lost someone the hospital couldn't save, and someone the old ways couldn't save either, I see you most of all. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Tell me in the comments what your family kept on the high shelf. The bottle nobody touched, the pouch nobody opened. I read them all, because every one of them is another voice in the same valley. There is so much more I haven't said yet. There are remedies I haven't been ready to share. The one my gross-daddy used on my brother's lockjaw. The one Rebecca's aunt used the night the barn burned. But I'm getting closer. Subscribe to if you want to be here when I am. And if a super chat or a membership feels right to you, that's you saying these old ways are worth remembering. And that keeps an old man telling them, come home before the lamp burns crooked.